Rudy and Jayden will tell us a little bit about their experience and any other detail that they want to share with you. So Rudy and Jayden, they are all yours.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thank you very much, Caroline and Melissa. So I guess we can start off by just giving you a bit of a run through of how things went for us in the program, and hopefully somewhere in that story you'll find evidence for all the things that Melissa and Caroline talked about already. So we started, like Carolina mentioned at the beginning, actually as part of the AppSci 169 group at UBCO, and that was how we started into the AquaHacking competition. And in the initial phase one, that was, I would argue, really the hardest time for us, honestly, because that's when you're faced with just the problem and no solution. And that can feel like a very a challenging task, because there's anything you can do. There's a huge amount of variety of things, and it's hard to figure out what the best way is forward. And that was a big challenge for us. And starting from that point of not knowing what to do, definitely not having the technical or business skills to actually realize any solution to that problem. And then now looking back after a year and some change at where we are now, I have to say that it's really remarkable, our experience with AquaHackers, and we're also thankful of the opportunity that we've had with AquaHackers to develop those skills and stuff that Melissa and Carolina were talking about in the process. So if I was to talk about the most beneficial part of the AquaHackers experience, I would say that whether you're someone from, I would say traditionally where people are right now in sort of their early undergraduate, that was our experience at least. People either don't know what they want to do yet, or they have sort of some very particular skills. For example, I was more technically inclined, and that was the case for a lot of my team members as well. But going through the AquaHackers process, we actually learned a lot about business, about the different parts of business. That includes like marketing, intellectual property. We learned about a lot of the legal things, how to structure corporations so you can take on risks as entrepreneurs, and other important things like that go into it. So there's a lot of ground you'll cover in the 8 months between the two, between starting and when you finish with AquaHackers. But with that lot of ground, you will definitely develop as a person. You'll become more capable at problem solving, in my experience, and it's some great experience to have under your belt. Perhaps some of the things I can attest to is just how useful the AquaHackers experience was for us afterwards in other things. So I can, Jayden and I can talk about our specific venture if you'd like as well. But after first year, I applied to the engineering physics program at UBC Vancouver, and the AquaHackers experience was actually a big part of my interview process. And that was a similar theme that I also saw when I was applying for co-ops as well. Is in interviews I would talk about the AquaHackers experience a lot, which I wouldn't actually have thought of prospectively would be the case, but retrospectively, after getting the job and talking to my employer, it starts to make sense why. Because really what I think the AquaHackers experience demonstrates once you've gone through it is one, that you take on initiative, because it's actually a big task to start from just a problem and then come up with a solution. That is what it means to be an entrepreneur in many ways, and it's what it means to bring change, is be willing to see a problem and create a solution. And the fact that you start off with very little skills perhaps that are relevant to starting a venture in some sort of technical endeavor towards one of the water issues, that actually shows something, because you learn how to learn quickly. That's another thing. Jayden and I know I can speak for Jayden here because we've had these conversations, but we definitely didn't start with all of the knowledge that we needed to make our product possible. But what happens is that you start with that problem, and then you incrementally come up with the next idea, and everything just happens in a stepwise fashion. And incrementally, as you come up with the next thing you want to do, you also learn the next skill that you need to. So over time, when you look back onto it, you've learned a lot. And one of the things that I know, speaking with my employer, he talked about with me, was that he was really impressed with how much experience there was, just because we went from the ideation process of how do you see a problem and come up with a solution, how do you analyze the existing solutions in the market, identify their weaknesses and translate those weaknesses into a potentially a new solution that makes up for them. Then how do you actually build a product or come up with a plan to build it? And then how do you market it, make it feasible in a business fashion, create a business model so that you can continue to build a product? And then, like I said, other things like, legally creating corporation, founders agreements, these are all fantastic experiences to have. And for them to be jam-packed in 8 months was truly fantastic in our case. And I'm really thankful for that. So that's my experience. Jayden, you wanna come in?
I think you covered pretty much everything there. I guess another thing I would like to add is our business mentor absolutely helped us so much during our time, especially with the pitch, because I feel like as engineers we sort of default to technical language. So having a business mentor to really to help us speak more concisely is absolutely helpful.
Yeah, definitely. The mentorship that we received, like Jayden was talking about. So we worked with a business mentor at the beginning. That was that was after we won semifinals. So we had that 2000, which was great because that allowed us to do a lot of things that a new startup needs to do and create a prototype and stuff. And then working with a business mentor, like Jayden said, was really invaluable. And then after that, we also partnered with another mentor we had was a technical mentor from Ovivo, I think, and she was down in the States, but she still was able to call with us and help us with the more technical aspects of our project. And then after we actually won the competition, we got even more networking assistance from MyTax to get even more funds. We were second place, so we didn't get the 20,000, we got the 15. But through a 4-to-1 match with MyTax, we're currently slated to get about $60,000 to work on our venture. So we're really excited for that. And then we also used the Lavery lawyers credits to incorporate a federal corporation to take on risk in this venture. And then, all of these partnerships that Melissa and Carolina talked about, they aren't nominal. They aren't only nominal. We actually used them. We actually really benefited from them. So I'll definitely second what Jayden said about the mentorship. Very, very useful. Yeah. But I think another thing about having us here is, you can ask us questions because I imagine that's one of the benefits of attending this live. So please, if you have any questions, I know I'm very willing to answer them. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much to both of you. Maybe before we continue on, can you give a bit of a breakdown on what it is you built through GAPSS and what your solution was?
Yeah, for sure. So we worked on one of the water issues last year was stormwater contamination. And the idea being, just as we continue to urbanize, we put in more and more impervious surfaces into our cities. So when we have precipitation events and rainfall or whatnot, combined with those impervious surfaces, what happens is that stormwater ends up flowing through our streets and collecting all the contaminants that we as humans inevitably leave as we live our lives, and then they make their way into storm drains before converging onto central water bodies, like I know in the Okanagan. It's the Okanagan Lake. So that problem with stormwater contamination is a real issue, and it's one that's been underaddressed for some while. So in face of that issue, what we developed was basically a unit that slides into existing storm drains and is able to filter out contaminants as early as possible in sort of the infrastructure cycle. Immediately as stormwater picks up these contaminants, the first point of entry it has into a municipality's infrastructure is through those storm drains. So implementing a simple slide-in filter that goes into those storm drains was a different way of approaching the problem, because existing solutions called for large, basically civil engineering projects to occur that would force you to basically dig up existing road or existing land and find the pipes and then install something within the pipes, and you need multiple of those units. They cost tens of thousands of dollars, and we were able to create a much simpler solution that simply fit into existing storm drains. And that was actually what I would call the first iteration, not of our product, but of our idea. I think there's two things. You tend to iterate your product, and your idea also tends to iterate as well. And there happened to be another water issue last year, flood monitoring. And just at some point, and this is something I think that really commonly happens when you're working on a product for so long, is we just had this realization that, hey, you know, we're already in so many storm drains. If this works, how hard would it be to address floodwater monitoring at the same time? Because the first point where you can address floods is as soon as you see backflow from stormwater drains. And turns out it's really simple. It's not exactly super simple, but it's relatively simple if you already have the infrastructure in this storm drain to add the sensor equipment and sort of the communications equipment to then monitor for floods. And then at that point, we also realized that, wait, we can make our existing filter smarter, because now we can add other sensors that would tell a city when certain sediment levels had reached a certain point or whatnot. So that's basically the overview of our equipment. It's a slide-in unit that filters out contaminants from stormwater, reports back on flood, gives back flood warnings, and also is able to talk about current maintenance status as well.
That's great. Thank you. That's really neat that you're expanding now to see how you could address the flooding issue as well. That's awesome.